The rain made everything slick and bright beneath the gallery's lights, gleaming off the wet streets of Gangnam as though it were washing the world's slate clean. Except the slate inside my chest scored raw tonight. I watched through the glass as people in pressed suits and immaculate dresses clustered around the entryway of the Gyeong Gallery. A few meters beyond, the empty sidewalk reflected wavering neon signs. The director closed the heavy door softly behind me. "GUNSSI one day maybe, but not this exhibition. Sorry, really." His shoes made a polite squeak as he turned. I stood still, violin case clutched hard in my left hand, the black box pressed coldly against my palm, sharp-edged and familiar. My umbrella trembled in my other hand. My soaked coat clung heavily to me, rain seeping into my collar, and all around the city pulsed with indifferent energy. Traffic lights flicking green, taxis skimming the curb, the hum of conversation rising and falling as friends and couples pushed past. I was invisible. I crossed the street and ducked under the awning of a closed bakery, pulling my coat tight, trying to shield my violin from the weather. I imagined my mother's face when I would step into our small apartment later, the rain and the defeat marking my arrival as low as it could get. She'd be sitting at our battered table, scrolling through job postings for secretaries and bank tellers, not for violinists. My phone buzzed. I pulled it from my pocket and read the screen. "Mina," her message. "How did it go?" I typed, "Didn't get it, too young, maybe next time." Three dots flickered, then, "Don't listen to them, you know you're good." I leaned my head back against the wall, shutting out the street's glare. I wondered if she really believed that. Probably not. Mina was my oldest friend, loyal if sometimes hesitant, but even she'd been awed into silence at last year's family dinner when my uncle had declared, "Ji-yoon should study something useful." "Violin, there's no living in that, it's not Switzerland, is it?" It cut, especially coming from a man who'd sold tofu for a living until his back gave out. He'd married off his daughter to a dentist, and to him, this was as high as a person could aim. A passing car splashed water onto the curb, frigid droplets landed on my ankle. I gripped my violin case harder. That rejection night didn't make the news. No one remembers it besides me. But it persisted like a stone in my shoe for months, even after the rain dried and the director forgot my name and another classically trained hopeful took my scheduled slot. Home was no comfort. Our apartment hovered over a narrow alley in Marpo. Mom's pride took any form but encouragement. When I told her what happened, she didn't look surprised. She put out a bowl of hot rice and kimchi as if that could patch over everything. Then gently, carefully, she said, "Maybe you could teach after school or look for a bank job like Mina." I looked at her, searching for something, sympathy, belief, a question about my heart or my music. But her face closed around her fear. I saw how it pinched her mouth tight, made her shoulders sink. She'd raised me alone since my father's accident. He'd played the Gyeong in his youth. Sometimes I wondered if that's why she hated the look of musical ambition in my eyes. At night, I practiced with a towel stuffed under the strings to mute the sound. The walls in those units were paper-thin, and once, our neighbor downstairs banged on the ceiling with a broom around midnight. I overheard Mom murmuring apologies the next day in the elevator. I took everything I could, a weekend job teaching Suzuki method to 3 9-year-olds in Decheong, pit orchestras for tiny dance recitals. I played weddings and busked in the underground passages under Seoul Station where the cool echo made my cheap strings sound finer. Sometimes I thought of the Gyeong Gallery rejection. The way the director's gaze slid away, already searching for someone else. On Chuseok, the family gathered at Uncle's apartment in Songpa, all platters of jun and yakgwa. When the conversation turned to jobs, it went the way it always did. "Ji-yoon, how's your music journey going?" Auntie Yoon-hee said, putting air quotes around the words with her chopsticks. She looked around for backup. Didn't someone once say she'd be on TV by now, or performing with the Philharmonic? Everyone laughed and I endured it, smiling politely. "I'm working," I said, swallowing hurt. "I have students. And small concerts." Uncle folded his arms. "Ah, yes, teaching children. Well, at least you're not starving." Mom giggled softly, nervously. My cousin Minhee shot me a glance of embarrassed sympathy, but she didn't say anything. That night in the bedroom I shared with Mom, I pressed my hands around the scroll of my violin and stared at the ceiling. My dignity thrummed quietly within, not pride, but something stubborn that wouldn't be washed away by their laughter. The years moved. I built brick by tiny brick a life of inches. I hustled for every gig, scrounged for every connection. Musicians whispered about a woman named Park Sunyoung. She had a small agency specializing in young classical artists. Some said she was crooked, others that she just drove too hard a bargain. My first meeting with her was at a dingy cafe in Sinsadong. She ordered an Americano and stared at me through rimless glasses. I watched you play at the student competition last year. You have presence but not technique. It strung. I nodded because it was true. She added, but technique can come. Presence cannot. She set me up for a series of auditions and student recitals. Some were disastrous, others were merely unremarkable. I learned resilience by scraping embarrassment from my scraped knees. Every rejection made me hone something else: intonation, phrasing, the nerves that made my hands sweat before I walked on stage. I learned to swallow my own harsh self-judgment, to replace it with a quiet but urgent hunger. There was a conductor, Yoon Ho, who gave younger musicians a chance. I applied to fill in for a sick violinist at his chamber concert. After the first rehearsal, he stopped me. "You play like you're running from fires." I waited, not sure if it was insult or compliment. He smiled. "That's good, but follow my tempo, not your hearts." Those gigs led to more: a summer tour playing second violin for the Seoul Sinfonietta. We traveled to Busan, Daegu, even distant Jeju, playing for audience after audience, the applause washing away some of the old hunger. I sent some pay home each month, never mentioning the insomnia, the occasional missed meals. My mother grew quieter. Sometimes she would sit with me while I practiced, not saying anything, folding laundry or eating persimmons, pretending not to listen. Years passed. Online, a video of me playing Batch at a rainy street festival went modestly viral, hundreds of thousands of views by fall. Sunyoung said, "We'll use this. Audiences love rain-soaked grit." Recordings came, awkward at first. I signed with a new string label made in Seoul and released an album of solo works. I hardly expected much, but it was reviewed, praised, even in Korean music magazines. Not the biggest publications, but enough to open more doors. 2 years later, Park Sunyoung called with a tight, excited voice. "Jiyoon, the Gyeong Gallery wants you to close their autumn concert series, solo. Full house." I stared at my phone, imagining that cold night when I'd stood outside their glass door. I could see my reflection in the windows, a little older, a little surer. This time, the invitation glittered like gold. Backstage at the Gyeong Gallery, I could see the audience in angled glimpses through the curtain. My mother sat with her hands folded in her lap, spine rigid. My uncle was there too, fidgeting with his tie, bored or anxious or both. Mina had brought her boyfriend, and when she caught my eye, she grinned and flashed a nervous thumbs up. Other musicians tuned quietly backstage, but I stood by myself, tuning my violin with trembling fingers. My program was ambitious, Sibelius, then Prokofiev, anchored by a wild modern Korean piece that terrified and thrilled me. Sunyoung approached in dark slacks and a pressed blouse. She put a hand on my arm. "They're full tonight and there are critics." I nodded, inhaled deeply, silence roaring in my ears. The lights dimmed, someone spoke brief announcements. Thunderous applause. I walked onto the burnished boards, the hall glowing like a lantern. The first note broke clean and high, filling the whole room. My heart pounded in time with the music. Each phrase surged through me. With every passage, I remembered the nights of practicing under my breath, the sting of the city's laughter at my dreams, the soaked humiliation of rain and rejection. In that moment, I owned the sound. My body and the violin became one instrument, pouring heartbroken defiance into the hall. The piece ended. Silence stretched long and complete before the applause burst. I looked to the front row. My mother's mouth was open in an O, her eyes shining. Mina was crying, mixing pride and relief. After the show, in the wings, the gallery's director, older now, lines grooving his face, shook my hand and bowed deeply. "Wonderful, June SSI, I hope you'll perform here again." I wanted to say something sharp, something about his previous dismissal, but all that rose was a strange, buoyant gratitude. I bowed back. My uncle approached, dragging my mother with him. He cleared his throat, clutching a cheap bouquet. "You were good. The newspaper says this concert sold out in a day. Is it true?" His voice seemed tight, half incredulous. I nodded. He shrugged, non-committal. My mother touched my cheek, her hands trembling. "You played beautifully. I didn't know it could be like that." I hugged her. She clung to me fiercely for a moment, then pulled away, wiping her eyes roughly. "You can move home if you like," she murmured, almost bashful, "if your work gets busy." By the time the audience had left, it was nearly midnight. Mina insisted we go for chicken and beer. We walked out together into the cooling night, my violin on my back. The city looked different, not smaller exactly, but somehow softer, the edges worn smooth by triumph. Word spread. A clip of my performance spread through social media. My phone overflowed with messages, old classmates, rival musicians, distant relatives suddenly eager to offer congratulations. The next week, my uncle invited me to dinner. Even Auntie Yoon-hee attended, and this time when they talked about jobs, nobody snickered. People asked me about the backstage process, the work, the music. It took a while before their praise stopped feeling ironic. One evening, after another successful recital, I came home to find my mother in the kitchen chopping scallions. I set my violin on the table. She nudged a bowl toward me. "We can tell your father now," she said quietly, almost smiling. "He would have liked that." We stood together in silence, just the hum of the city leaking through the curtains. In the months that followed, I kept playing, touring, teaching. The sting of those old rejections faded, replaced by a constant, ringing dignity inside me. In every audience, I saw someone else's disbelief slowly unravel before evidence, solid, irrefutable, born in sound and sweat and years of resolve. After all, concrete proof isn't always a medal or a review. Sometimes it's the moment you walk back into a room where everyone doubted you and set your violin gently on the table. The silence before applause, the hush of the city, the sudden warmth in your mother's eyes, those are the real victories. The return, the belonging you claim by earning it, one bitter, beautiful note at a time.